Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining me. Today, I am going to tell a couple of stories relating to the topic of self-love. And if that title makes you giggle a little bit, I'm giggling with you. These aren't those kind of stories. That might be a topic for a different show. When I talk about self-love, I mean being kind to yourself, valuing yourself. One of the ways that I practice self-love is by storytelling. It is something that I truly love. It makes me feel happy. It makes me feel connected to people. So thank you so much for being here with me so I can do my storytelling and practice my own self-love in that way. Also, I am telling stories today, personal stories from my own life. But I want you to know that when I talk about my own self-love, that I share that because I love you, because I'm trying to contribute to a culture of self-love, put that out there in the world, and make this more of a place where everyone can practice self-love. So I am also doing this out of my love for all of you. So this first story that I'm going to tell does take place when I was living in England a couple weeks ago when I was telling librarian stories. I had another story from my time in England. I found out that I was pregnant on the day that my husband John and I were leaving on our British road trip. We were living over in Norwich, England. We had moved there the previous fall of 2008, right after we got married. John had a scholarship to study at the University of East Anglia, and we didn't really take a honeymoon. We just moved, and John started going to school. So we had thought, as kind of a slightly delayed honeymoon, that over his spring break, we would rent a car and go on a road trip around the UK. Now, in the days leading up to our road trip, I knew that there was a chance that I was pregnant, and I thought I should just go ahead and do the pregnancy test before we left so I wouldn't have to worry about it on the road trip. So, on the morning that we were planning to leave, I woke up and, peed on the stick, and it said that I was pregnant, and I thought, okay, well, so what do I do now? What I did was that I called up the University Health Center and I convinced them to see me that morning as soon as they opened. And when I went, the nurse did another pregnancy test and she said, yeah, you're pregnant. You can come back and see us again in 6 weeks. And in the meantime, start reading this. And she handed me a British pregnancy handbook. It had all the do's and don'ts for pregnancy. I went back to the flat. John and I finished packing up our rental car. He got in the driver's seat, I got in the passenger seat, and we set off. And as we were driving along, I was flipping through my British pregnancy handbook. Now, on that first day of our trip, we were driving straight across the country. Norwich is located not too far from the eastern coast of England. And we were headed to Cornwall, where a friend of ours was living, and Cornwall is on the west coast. So we were driving across the country on the motorway. After we had been driving for a little while, I asked John if he would stop somewhere so I could use the bathroom. He pulled off at one of the motorway rest stops. We both did what we needed to do, got back in the car. And then, as we were trying to get back on the road, it turned out that where we had stopped was actually at a very large intersection, and there was this complicated double roundabout. To John's credit, he did get us back on the correct motorway, but going in the wrong direction, so we were headed back the way we had come. And then there weren't any other stops for several kilometers, so we went backwards for a while before we found a place to pull off and turn around, get going in the correct direction again. And we were almost back to that same rest stop where we had pulled off before when I told John that I needed to pee again. And this is not my fault. My British pregnancy handbook said that when you're pregnant, you have to pee a lot. But John said that he absolutely was not stopping at that rest stop again, that I would have to wait until the next one. And fortunately, we didn't have to go too far in that direction before there was another rest stop. So we drove on for a while, and around the middle of the day, we stopped at a gas station for lunch. The gas station offered a hot meal, and then they also had one of those coolers that was full of already prepared food. What I really wanted for lunch that day was a sandwich I had fallen in love with since we had moved to England. Brie and cranberry on a baguette. Now, they did have brie and cranberry sandwiches in the cooler, but my British pregnancy handbook said that I was not allowed to eat soft cheeses. Now, if you're not familiar with this rule, it is because in the US, all of our cheese is pasteurized. But in Europe, the soft cheeses often are not pasteurized. And I have to tell you, they taste better that way. But there is a risk of foodborne illness. So I did not get the brie and cranberry sandwich. Instead, I got the hot meal, which was standard British fare of meat and potatoes and mushy peas. We continued on. We reached Cornwall that evening and spent a couple days there visiting with our friend. We visited the castle at Tintagel, which according to legend is where King Arthur was conceived. And this became sort of a theme for our road trip, because what John was really excited about doing on our road trip was visiting castles. What I really wanted to do on our road trip was see Roman ruins, because I was a Latin major as an undergraduate, and I'm very interested in Roman literature and Roman history, and I thought if I was in a place that had been part of the Roman Empire, I wanted to see some Roman ruins. When we left Cornwall, we drove north, and we did spend a day in the city of Bath, and we saw the ruins of the Roman baths there. Then we continued north into Wales, which started our several-day-long Welsh castle tour. Every day we saw a different Welsh castle, and every night we stayed at a different hotel or bed and breakfast. Now, early on when we were in Wales, we spent the night in a manor house that had been converted into a hotel. And as we were leaving in the morning, we drove past this giant field that was full of sheep. And because it was springtime, there were lambs. And because it was a little bit chilly that morning, the lambs were up on top of their mothers' backs, all snuggled down into their wool. It was adorable. I wanted to ask John to pull off to the side of the road so I could walk over to the fence and reach my hand through and try to pet a lamb. But my British pregnancy handbook said that I was not to be anywhere near lambs or sheep that were having lambs because of the risk of catching listeria. So I just looked at the lambs out the window as we drove by. And then these castles that we were seeing every day. The castles all had pretty much the same story. They had been built by the Welsh to protect them against the English, and the English eventually took over the castles and used them to continue oppressing the Welsh. And these castles were in various states of ruin or repair. Some had been kept up quite well over the years, even turned into museums. Other castles were little more than a pile of rubble. But it seemed that no matter what state the castles were in, all of them had at least one tightly spiraling set of stone steps leading up to the battlements. And John always wanted to go up to the battlements. I was in pretty good shape before I got pregnant, running about 3 miles a day. But I found myself just huffing and puffing as I was going up these stone steps. Whenever there was a little extra space, I would kind of pull off to the side so that I could catch my breath and other tourists could pass me. My British pregnancy handbook said that it might be difficult for me to do some physical activities that had once been relatively easy because, I was now sharing my blood and oxygen with this growing baby. And then when we were driving between these castles, we were going through just this beautiful Welsh countryside, rolling green hills, there were these hedges along the sides of the narrow, winding roads, one lane winding roads that we were going down. And I'll admit that with the sunlight coming in through the car windows and the motion of the car, I usually just fell asleep. And it's not my fault. My British pregnancy handbook said that when you're pregnant, you need more sleep. But every once in a while, the view was so beautiful that John didn't think I should miss it. And he'd reach over and he'd say, hey, you should see this. And I would cut my eyes at him and I would say, you let me sleep. I think my handbook also said that being pregnant can make you irritable. We eventually came out the northern border of Wales and we cut over to Scotland, to the city of Edinburgh. And while we were in Edinburgh, we did visit the castle. John ate haggis at every meal. And now what I had wanted to do in Scotland, back when we were planning our trip, what I had hoped to do in Scotland was to go Scotch tasting. That seemed like the thing to do. But of course, my British pregnancy handbook said that you're not supposed to drink alcohol while you're pregnant. Actually, what the handbook said was that you shouldn't drink alcohol while you're pregnant. But if you have to, try to only drink a little. Being in Scotland felt like extenuating circumstances, but I was good. We didn't go Scotch tasting. We went on a ghost tour instead. And that was mostly the end of our trip. From there, we headed back to our flat in Norwich. We did make one more stop on the way at Hadrian's Wall. Hadrian's Wall was a wall built by the Roman Emperor Hadrian around the northern border of the Roman Empire in Britain. So we saw another little bit of some Roman ruins. And then we got back to our flat and our road trip was over. Just a couple of days after our road trip, I was scheduled to chaperone a museum club field trip to Colchester Castle. While John was in school in Norwich, I was volunteering to keep myself busy. One of the places I volunteered with was Ancient House Museum in our neighboring city of Thetford. And usually what I did for Ancient House was that I helped out with their special programs. I would come and do storytelling, or I would lead kids in a craft. But some of the staff at Ancient House did lead this club for kind of middle school age kids who were into museums. And they had planned a field trip to Colchester Castle. They had been looking for some extra adults to come chaperone, and weeks earlier when they had asked me if I would chaperone, I had thought, oh yeah, this will be fun. I'm gonna get a free trip to go see a castle. But after driving around with John for 2 weeks, I was thinking, oh great, another castle. I wasn't feeling great. My experiences on the road trip had left me feeling that being pregnant makes you weak and wimpy and no fun. I didn't feel like doing things that I once had enjoyed doing. I wasn't allowed to do a whole bunch of things. I was a little bit further into my pregnancy. I was feeling the first twinges of morning sickness. I did not want to go to Colchester Castle. But of course it was way too late for me to back out. So that morning I took the train over to Thetford and met up with everyone at Ancient House. I was assigned 3 young people to be responsible for, and then we all boarded a charter bus and drove over to Colchester. Now, of course, Colchester Castle is one of those castles that's been turned into a museum, and the first thing that we were going to do was that the kids got to kind of freely explore the museum. They just had to stay in their groups. So I followed my 3 young people as they very sweetly geeked out over all kinds of museum stuff. Then we all met back up and we got this special behind the scenes tour. The museum employee took us through a door down these steps into a room that was below the castle. Entirely stone floor, stone walls, low stone ceiling. She had us all sit down and she started talking to us. She told us that we were in the ruins of a Roman temple. The castle had been built directly on top of these ruins. And I thought, okay, Roman ruins. This is not just another castle. Things are looking up a little bit. And then she started talking about Boudica, and I knew about Boudica from translating the Roman historian Tacitus in one of my college classes. Tacitus talks about Boudica's rebellion. She was the queen of one of the ancient British tribes. She led a famous uprising against the occupying Romans during the reign of the Emperor Nero. And then the tour guide mentioned that the modern day city of Colchester was the ancient Roman settlement of Camulodunum. And I suddenly knew exactly where I was. I wasn't in the ruins of just any Roman temple. I was in the ruins of the temple to divine Claudius. Tacitus specifically mentions this temple because Camulodunum was the first place that Boudica and her followers attacked. And the Romans who were living in the settlement, they all went into the temple to try to protect themselves. But after several days' siege, the Britons tore down the temple stone by stone and burned Camulodunum to the ground. It was Boudica's first victory. And I sat there in this temple thinking about Boudica. Now, Boudica was a mother. She had daughters, and they were a big part of the reason that she did what she did. She was trying to defend them, to avenge their mistreatment at the hands of the Romans. Being a mother did not make Boudica weak and wimpy and no fun. It made her a force to be reckoned with. I enjoyed the rest of my stay at Colchester Castle very much. And that afternoon when I got back to my flat, I dug through my luggage, which was still not unpacked, pulled out that British pregnancy handbook, and I just tore it apart, page by page. I was not suffering from pregnancy. I am a warrior queen. All right, so that's my first story about my British road trip. Kind of a story about finding your power, your inner goddess. And now for my next story, I'm going to go way back in time to actually when I was a kid. Now, before I get started, I just want to let you know, I want to reassure you that everyone in this story is going to be okay. When I was in 6th grade, my teacher assigned the whole class a project. We were going to work in small groups. In our groups, we had to research a famous person, and then we would have to do a presentation for the class. And we had a lot of options as far as what we could do for the presentation. We could make something like a poster or some other craft and then tell the class about it as a way of conveying what we had learned. We could act out a skit. We could come up with something else. We had a lot of options as long as we could communicate to the class what we had learned about our famous person. I was in a group with 2 boys, and our famous person was Abraham Lincoln. Pretty early on in the project, we decided that for our presentation, we would act out an interview with Lincoln. We thought he was known for being witty, he was a public figure, an interview kind of made sense. So one of the boys in the group was going to portray Lincoln. I was going to be the interviewer. The other boy in the group, he was kind of quiet and shy. He was going to have a very small part of sort of introducing our presentation, but not much else. And this was fine. We were all happy with the division of labor. Our teacher hadn't required that everyone really have a major role in our presentation. But then, the week that we were finishing up this project, I got sick. And it seemed at first like I just had kind of a cold. I was like coughing and sneezing. And as soon as I came to school sick, the boys in my group said, You're not going to be absent on the day of the presentation, are you? You're not going to be home sick. And they both were concerned about this, because we were working hard in this project and we wanted it to go the way we had planned. But especially the one boy who was kind of quiet and shy, he really didn't want me to be absent, because if I wasn't there, he would have to take over my role as interviewer and he would have to have a major part in the presentation. But I told them, oh no, I wouldn't let a cold stop me from coming to school. Don't worry about it. As the week went on, I got sicker. I developed laryngitis and my voice wasn't totally gone. I could kind of force it out. You know, it didn't sound pretty. But it was clear that I really wasn't feeling great. And we got to the day before the presentation. And again, the guys were bugging me. They said, are you sure you're gonna be here tomorrow? Are you sure? And I tried to reassure them. I said, oh yeah, I will make sure that I'm here tomorrow. But they were bugging me, and they just weren't at all confident I was showing up. And I finally said, look, the only way that I won't be here tomorrow is if I'm dead. And then they shut up. They believed me. So the next morning, I got up. I felt worse than ever. My body hurt, still had the laryngitis. I felt like maybe I had a low-grade fever. But I rolled out of bed, I threw on my clothes, and I got on the school bus. On the bus, I kind of rested my head up against the cool window, and I was looking out at the world going by. And the bus was coming around this curve to an intersection, a stop sign. We stopped at this stop sign every day. The cross traffic didn't stop, so we often had to pause there for a few moments, waiting for our turn to go. And on this particular morning, it looked to me like the bus was moving, like it was going to roll right up to the stop sign and stop. But there was a car already stopped at the stop sign that didn't look like it was going to be able to move anytime soon. And so if we kept going like we were going to hit the car. And I thought, well, that can't be right. Maybe there's some sort of an optical illusion because I'm looking at this out of the side of the bus, or maybe I'm just delirious because of having a fever. And then sure enough, the bus hit that car. And no one was injured. This was a very low speed accident. The car was stopped. The bus was coming to a stop. But it was an accident, and so the bus and the car both pulled off to the side of the road, and we had to wait for the police to come. And all of the kids had to stay on the school bus the entire time while we were waiting for the police, while the police officer was talking to the two drivers. Finally, the bus driver got back on the bus and finished driving us to school. And of course, we were late to school. The front office had to check us all in. I finally walked into my classroom. The two guys in my group looked like they were seeing a ghost, because I had told them the only way I wouldn't be there that day was if I was dead. And then I wasn't there when school started. So they kind of thought I might be dead. And I said, no, it's fine, you guys. I just was in a bus accident. It's all good. So we did our presentation that afternoon, and everyone was happy. But I thought that this whole incident was kind of funny. So that evening, at the dinner table with my mom and my sister, I wanted to tell them about it. I said, hey, you guys, you remember how yesterday I told those two guys in my group that the only way I wouldn't be at school today was if I was dead? And they kind of looked over me and they said, yeah. And I said, well, so I was riding the bus this morning, and my mom already could tell that maybe something not great was coming, so she interrupted me. Tell me that everyone is going to be okay. And I ignored her. So I was riding the bus this morning, and there's that stop sign where we stop every day? Tell me that everyone is going to be okay. So we were coming up to this stop sign, and there was a car already stopped at the stop sign. Sarah, tell me everyone is going to be okay. Mom, let me tell the story my way. Now, my mom and I still have a good laugh about this. I guess, even as an 11-year-old, I was a storyteller. I wanted to craft my story. Also, it's kind of funny, right? Because I was sitting right there with my mom at the dinner table. So the end of the story was kind of given away. I mean, nothing too terrible could have happened. And then it's also kind of funny because I wasn't okay before I got on the bus that morning. I had a fever, I had laryngitis. I had this crazy idea that I had to show up to school no matter what because people were counting on me. Now, I told you at the beginning that everyone in the story was going to be okay, and I didn't lie to you. I am okay. As an adult, now I am married, I have kids, I am a tenure-track professor at a university, I'm on boards and committees. There are a lot of people who count on me. And you know, at least some of those people would fully expect me to show up, even if I was sick and in a bus accident. But I have to tell you that every once in a while, I take a day off, and I'm not even dead. That's the end. So thank you so much for listening to my stories. I hope that they have inspired you to find your inner warrior, queen, or king, and also to show yourself some love and kindness and know when you need to take a day off. And I thank you again for being part of my practice of self-love, allowing me to tell my stories. Thanks so much, and have a good week.